Hip Hop 1212. This is the Button Pusher representing Grind City TV Network Roku, and you're tuned in to It's Yours Radio with legendary interviews, classic music, hosted by Donnie O and J Mo.
Us, being black in America, we have a checkered history when it comes to the government and vaccinations. We know, a lot of us know the history of that, and because of that, a lot of us are apprehensive about it. That's one thing, and then also there's another myth out there that the timeline that this vaccination, it came about so quickly and so swiftly, but they've been working on this quite some time. So go ahead and address those two issues.
Okay, and this is actually Dr. Prest domain, but at the Dorchester County Health Department, we have a physician also who kind of enlightened all of us about the vaccine. The COVID-19 is a SARS virus, and they have actually been working on a vaccine for SARS for over a decade. So it's not nearly as quick as, kind of like some of the misinformation that's out there. They've been working on it for quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have to remember that the COVID virus itself is not a new virus. It's existed for over 50 years. The concept of COVID outbreaks is also not new. In Asia, they had COVID outbreaks before, but they weren't to the extremity that they have been recently. And in the Middle East, it was called MERS, MERS. They had outbreaks. And based on that, they had actually started doing research on the vaccine, because anytime you're having pockets of outbreaks, you know that there's always the possibility that that virus will mutate and become a pandemic. The initial two companies had, like Valerie said, been working on those vaccines. One actually had it in their quote-unquote vault. And I always tell my patients, drug companies don't do nothing for free, right? Mm-hmm. If they have a vaccine and the virus disappears, they're not going to put it out there because nobody's going to pay for it. Right. So they keep it in their vault, and it is there for when they need it. If they need to adapt it to something else, they have that ability. And that's pretty much what happened. So it wasn't like they started from scratch. There are companies that did start from scratch, but they all had the same educational template of, this is the kind of virus you want to make. This is what you want to attack it for. And even with the newer ones, you can see that we have the DNA virus vaccines and the mRNA virus vaccines. The mRNA research itself, the vaccines, 10 years, they've been doing research on it, but the whole concept of working with mRNA to create vaccines and to use it in health sciences is over 20 years old. The difference between this vaccine and other vaccines was we were in a crisis. We didn't have the luxury of saying, oh, we'll make this vaccine whenever. We needed to ramp up its production and ramp up its schedule. However, at the same time, we have never had this many people involve themselves voluntarily in a study at the same time. Typically, especially for the African American community, the Latino community, the patients with HIV, they stepped forward and volunteered, not just the Caucasian community or the Asian community. All of the groups willingly had members in different age groups step forward and volunteer, so that they had 70,000 participants in the first research study. That's how come they got the emergency use authorization. And I will point out that AstraZeneca, the one that's been having a lot of noise, their emergency use authorization was delayed because the data they presented was not on par. It wasn't where it needed to be. Europe went ahead and approved it. That's their problem, not our problem. We approved the two that had data on par. And so even though it seemed like it was fast from the scientific perspective, we can look at all that data. It met the guidelines of every other vaccine that we've had. It has to have a certain percentage of success rate with immunity. Before we look at that, we look at the side effects, we look at the adverse outcomes, and then the panel says, this is safe enough for the broader community. And definitely when we do what we call a risk-benefit ratio, risk of people being admitted and or dying or having lifelong complications versus risk of the vaccine, there's no comparison.
What's the difference between the two? Well, it's three now. I know Pfizer.
We have
Moderna.
Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. Yes.
Yeah.
Pfizer and Moderna are both the mRNA vaccines. The mRNA, you have both of them has to do with DNA, but it's not our DNA. It's the viruses. that we're looking at, right? So the mRNA vaccine is a protein that they utilize to make the core of the vaccine. And so you have two of those, and then the DNA is the Johnson & Johnson.
Okay. And with those, what's the difference between the vaccine for COVID and, say, for the flu?
So the flu looks at a capsid. So it takes the flu virus and it takes a capsid, a portion of the coding of the virus, and they create an antigen against it to make your body have a response such that you're what I would call the army in your cells that attack viruses. They remember that virus, and when that virus gets in your system, they have a game plan, i.e., your body has already said, this virus exists. It may come to our borders, that's your body, and attack. How do we make sure it doesn't get a foothold and we win that war? When you get your flu vaccine, you have that memory template. Your general cells have already discussed it, made up a game plan. The virus comes in. You might not even feel sick. If you do, you're not as sick as you would have been if you didn't know that the enemy virus was coming. That's how all vaccines kind of work. Some of the viruses the vaccines that we make are live vaccines. That means it has a live portion of the virus. That's your measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox vaccines. Some are what we call non-live or inactive. All the other ones are inactive. All of the COVID vaccines are inactive. You're not going to get COVID from the vaccine. You can get a feeling of sickness from it. Any vaccine will do that because, again, your body is at war when you introduce that virus into that system. When you introduce the protein, your body is like, oh, is that a spy? Is that the real thing? So it's going to send out its first platoon out, and that's going to cause a reaction in you. And so everybody has varying severities of reactions based on how well their body responds, but it's not going to be the same thing as if you saw the real virus.
Gotcha. What's the difference between? I know you get 2 shots. With what's the difference? Because I'm set up to get the shot myself, and everybody I've known has gotten the shot. I guess they were told that the second shot could. Most of them just had a little soreness in their arm, and that was it for the most part. But they said on the second shot, some of them did get, slight symptoms like maybe,
the symptoms could be fever, muscle aches, fatigue, sometimes runny nose. We would always want to assess somebody who said they had a cough. We were like, maybe you actually might have been sick. So with most vaccines, the goal is to get 80% or more immunity. And most vaccines, 1 shot alone can't do it. So measles, mumps, and rubella, you got 2 shots. Tetanus, you get a booster every 10 years because your immunity wanes. Chickenpox, it used to be 3. We took it down to 2. Now they're debating going back to 3. You usually need a booster because your body sees it, comes up with a game plan, responds. But in order to make sure you have enough warrior cells to react when you see the real virus, we have to give you enough stimulus. If you're a kingdom in your throne and you see a little small company coming around and you got enough people to defeat it, you might not really mount a response. But if they keep coming, you're gonna be like, oh, they're serious. I need to make sure they don't come back. So that's what it is. So the first vaccine, and we don't have the data, but we'll be able to see in a couple years. The UK decided to just give everybody their first vaccine. They will go back later to determine who will get 2. That's a risk they took because the first vaccine for Moderna and Pfizer should give you up to 70% immunity. The second one gives you anywhere between 94 and 96% immunity. That would be the ideal. Everybody wants to have 96 better than 70. But 70 is also better than 0. And they had a crisis, so they chose that way. We decided we would go with the Moderna and Pfizer because they had the best data, the highest number of people volunteered. And then we're trying to give the people who are lower risk the Johnson & Johnson because that on the one vaccine can give you 70, 80%. So trying to get as many people vaccinated as possible, that's how we came up with the 3.
So with that, both shots is the exact same vaccine in both of them?
It'll be the exact same vaccine.
Okay.
So if you get Moderna once, you get Moderna the second time. You get Pfizer once, you get Pfizer the second time.
So they having some people have those reactions because it's a second dose.
Yeah, we've actually
itself.
found people who have had COVID and get the one dose. They might get sicker on the first vaccine, but not on the second vaccine because they already have circulating antibodies from having had COVID.
Okay. Here's a question I have. Okay. I'm a long hauler, so I had COVID back in July.
Okay.
And I still have some difficulty breathing, and every now and then, because it's like a hesitation, like a
You feel like you're not taking as deep a breath as
right.
you should.
And then sometimes, and I only have to be walking anywhere. Sometimes I just have to, you know that. Okay. And now, again, this is information that's out there that, some people, they live and die by what they see on the internet. And that's why we wanted to have you ladies here to dispel some of that. So this is a question I have for you. Is it true that getting the vaccine can help, I guess, I don't know, maybe get rid of some of those long hauling symptoms?
We do not know that with the long haulers.
Okay.
They are
Gotcha.
still collecting data on the long haulers because first we didn't anticipate the long haul syndrome. There are very few viruses that create that long haul syndrome. Usually it's bacterial infections that do that. So an example is Lyme disease. That's a bacterial, it's a spirochete that some people, for some reason, even if we catch it early, they have long-term complications. But for almost all the viruses, once you survive it and you're on your own, you're good. The only ones are the ones that cause encephalomyelitis, like meningitis. That can cause some long-haul stuff. So we didn't really anticipate this to begin with. Then we started to see that we were having patients that 3, 4, 6 months out, they have chronic fatigue, they have shortness of breath, they can't exercise. Even the athletes can't exercise it like they used to. Heart races without any cause. Blood pressure, people that didn't have blood pressure are developing blood pressure post-COVID with no risk factors, like no family history of blood pressure. None of that could we anticipate. So we're kind of keeping data. Every primary care doctor, every cardiologist, every pulmonologist, that's a heart doctor and lung doctor that have these patients, we're all keeping those patients, keeping their data right, documenting heavily in their chart. And then there are physicians who are now studying this as a protocol, like what are the common symptoms for long haulers? What are the follow-up evaluations we have to do for long haulers? But as far as what that vaccine will do for the long haulers, we don't have that. You know why? When we did the trials, we didn't have long haulers. So we don't have anything but the long haulers now that are getting the vaccine.
And just real quick, J-Mo wants to add on, but I had another question. My mom, I mentioned to Ms. Davis in the lobby when I had it, including myself, it was 16 family members that we all had COVID. And 6 of us were hospitalized, including myself and my parents. And maybe 2 months after having COVID, my mother, my sister-in-law, and my sister all experienced hair loss.
Yes.
Temporary hair loss.
Yes.
Talk
Hair
about that real
loss,
quick.
difficulty with nails. Let me go back to the 16 people in your family. This is a common theme in the African American community because we love us, our family.
It was a
And
good
it's
together.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard not to get together.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to share food because we love to eat. Ain't nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's dangerous,
Yeah.
right? So it's more common in the African American community for us to have that 17, 20 people in a family, and everybody gets sick. And it's varying degrees about who gets sick and what. We don't know why with women, and that's across races, they seem to lose the hair more. But yeah, the hair loss is a real phenomenon. We're not even sure what the biomechanism is. We've had people with nails coming off, nail color, discoloration, chronic rashes that seem to come up, what we call idiopathic urticaria, which is breaking out in hives or patches of skin for no reason.
J-Mo, you want to add on?
Yeah, I have a question from a live. Someone asked on a live, could you explain what is the difference between the previous COVID and the current strain that's out now?
Mutation. If you've ever remembered, depending on how young or old you are, there are some years where the flu virus, nobody really remembers getting a bad flu. And there are other years where same thing. You had a family get together and 6 people got the flu and 3 of them ended up in the hospital. And that's when we have a bad mutation. The reason why you get a flu vaccine every year is because the flu likes to mutate. It's always trying to be one step ahead of us, and we're always fighting that battle. And there's some years people will say, I got the flu shot, it didn't work. Yeah, we weren't prepared for the mutation. So the COVID virus has been around. There's a whole bunch of, if you notice that they'll say SARS-CoV-2, because they all have these weird little initials. I don't know who makes up the names, but they all have, just like the flu had H1N1, H1N2, H2N1, SARS has its own series. This mutation, and now you're hearing it, it's mutated 3 times in the last 8 months. It loves to mutate, and we were not prepared for the mutations.
Hip Hop 1212, this is the button pusher representing Grind City TV Network Roku, and you're tuned in to It's Yours Radio with legendary interviews, classic music, hosted by Donnie O and J Mo.
I know you called my phone last night, and yes, I did let it ring a couple times. And no, you don't need to know why, cause I'm not wearing a ring, I'm not your wife.
Cop the new single Commitment Issues from 15-year-old singing sensation Ramsey Renee, available on all streaming platforms.
Easy over there, Selector. Easy, Selector. It's the Party King, DJ Cheese, ItzYourzRadio, live 97.5, everything urban. Breakfast Club in the morning. Ryan Banks tonight, Donnie O, J-Mo.
Yes, indeed, man. We're giving them that real facts for the community, man. They need to hear it from the real. This is the real facts right here you're getting right now about the vaccination. Not the Facebook facts, not the Instagram facts, the real facts right here on the real sound of the DMV. 97.5 FM, It's Yours Radio Live.
Doctor, isn't it amazing? Oh, again, we have with us Valerie Davis and Dr. Prest. But isn't it amazing? You went to school, put a lot of time into what you do, and all of a sudden we have all these Facebook doctors and these Instagram doctors that know more than you, and those are your field.
Unfortunately, it's not all of a sudden. I think they've always been there. I don't have any objections to natural remedies. I think they can be used in conjunction. I mean, when I get a cough and cold, I'm a lover of Vicks Mentholatum Rub, and my mom has this whole, it's got to be Gordon's. It has to be Gordon's. I bought Tanqueray home, and she was mad at me. It has to be Gordon's with honey and lemon, and she does a special thing with it. That's okay, but you still have to see your doctor for stuff. I always said, God gave us this education for a reason. He gave us the ability to find these medicines for a reason. He created the speedy vaccine for a reason. Let's not, I always joke, I'm like, Jesus down up in heaven, like, why should she keep praying? There's a vaccine. Why don't she get the vaccine? Why did I waste time making that man make the vaccine? So there's nothing wrong with herbals, but you have to put your faith in both herbals and science together. Don't leave one for the other. It hurts my heart when somebody dies because they believed in herbals. I was just talking about the president of Tanzania. He believed that prayer would protect his country, and he died of COVID. That's not what we want to see. We want as many people to survive this as possible.
J-Mo?
So I got a question, doctor, from Miss Emily Dupree
Emily.
Vaughn. She said, could you address why people get sick after getting a vaccination?
So it's a matter of your body's immune response. So the more sick you are, actually it means the better immune response you had. So when you see the virus the next time, your body is better prepared. So I'll use myself an example. I have an autoimmune disorder, and I'm on an immune suppressant. In our office, we have 14 employees, and I had the least symptoms because I'm on an immune suppressant. So even though I got the vaccine, I probably don't have as good immunity as everybody else. We had 3 staff members who had fevers. They've got excellent immunity, One who doesn't take any medication. She's healthy as a horse. She was probably the sickest one. Excellent immunity. But usually with the vaccine, the symptoms will rarely, very rarely last more than 2 days. If it does, we are concerned. Something else is going on. And it's not uncommon for people to get a vaccine, or even like if somebody's in an accident, we get an x-ray and we find out that they have some major issue that's affecting their immunity that we didn't know about until they had that reaction. So, but in general, a good reaction gives you symptoms. A weak reaction, keeps me a little scared because, but I can't be off my anti-immunity, so it is what it is.
Why has COVID affected the black community, particularly at a higher rate?
At a higher rate, one, like we said before, we love our family. We love to congregate. None of us are going to know that our grandmama's alone and not go get her and go make sure she's got her food and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we don't have as great access to care, We unfortunately have more, our workforce is such that we couldn't stay home, right? Not a lot of us had that privilege of being able to work online. We had to go do our jobs, which meant we had higher exposure. In New York, it's a prime example. Most of the people who had to ride the subway were African Americans and Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else was like, okay, I'll drive, But if you live in a place where you can't afford to drive and you got to take a subway, that's higher exposure. Everybody's going to work. So it's a combination of we are more clustered. We tend to cluster with our families in times of crisis, and all of us have to work. If I tell you the number of grandmamas who have been babysitting 3, 4, 7 grandchildren because their family has to work and daycare centers were shut down, that increases the risk for grandmama. That increases the risk for all those families of the grandchildren because now you've got multiple cousins all in the same grandmama's home. So that's been a lot of my patients.
J-Mo?
Okay, Donnie, I got another question from Miss Catherine Burton. She says that she tries to sign people up for vaccines, and frequently she hears people say that they are too sick or have too many conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes. Could you address that?
Absolutely. Okay, so for all my patients who call, and we have a lot, and they'll say, hey, Dr. Prest, am I okay to get this vaccine? I have a list of patients that they might not be able to get the vaccine. Typically, it's a cancer patient because they're getting cancer therapy, chemotherapy. For my autoimmune, there's a protocol. So I did not have to hold my medication, but there are some people with autoimmune that they have to hold their medication because, again, if they're suppressed too much, they won't get a response, and that defeats the purpose. So we have a protocol for that. Diabetes, hypertension, obesity. Those are the top 3, more than respiratory, even though the virus causes respiratory symptoms that are severe. Diabetes, hypertension, and obesity are the 3 big ones that put your risk for fatality, death, higher. So yes, absolutely. If you have that, you should get the vaccine. But if you're concerned, just call your doctor. Is it okay that I get the vaccine? 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. Unfortunately, hypertension, we are 3 times higher than the rest of the population as far as the African community. Diabetes, 2 to 3 times, depending on where in the country you live. And obesity, y'all know we all big girls. We all, we don't like to be skinny. Our men like us that way, but, it is a risk factor we can't ignore.
Okay, I got another question from Miss Mika Brooks. Are there any health situations where you may not recommend getting the vaccination?
Like I said, cancer is a big one, and I do know some cancer patients that their doctors have created a protocol where they can get it. Some people have easily anaphylactic reaction. Anaphylaxis is where your face swells up, you can't breathe, you might pass out. It can lead to death if we're not aware. That is not a contraindication. That is, it has to be done in medical supervision. So you want your doctor to know, you get pre-medicated. Other than that, if you have any concerns, like I said, ask your doctor, your primary care doctor, what do I need to do anything before I take this vaccine? But they're very few. Now, right now, the vaccine is only approved for 16 and above. They are doing studies. I think they're in phase 3 for the, I think it's 5 to 16, but they haven't released that yet.
And that was my next question. Someone asked, when will it be approved for children?
They just started the studies for Pfizer and Moderna, I believe, late December.
Okay.
Obviously, people had to be willing to sign their kids up for it. One of my friends is a doctor and missed the deadline. I was so mad. But until they get enough data to say, yes, they're doing great with it, no side effects, I can't really tell you.
Okay.
First of all, It's Yours Radio, live 97.5, everything Urban Breakfast Club in the morning. Ryan Banks tonight, Donnie O, J-Mo, the Party King, DJ Cheese. We have with us Valerie Davis and Dr. Prest from the Dorchester County Health Department, giving us some pertinent information on the COVID vaccine. And for those who are online, again, you can go to YouTube, go to Live 975 on YouTube, and we're streaming right there live. Also on Facebook, Live 97.5, and on Twitch as well, Live 97.5. And, of course, tune in, Live 97.5, and to the website, live975.com. Now, with a lot of this information, some folks may miss, but is there like a website or somewhere they can go to get a lot of this information that you're giving to the community?
First of all, there's a lot of places, but we recommend the CDC because that's where you're going to get the real-time, updated information. So we encourage people to go to the CDC's website to get the information, and we at the Dorchester County Health Department also follow the CDC guidelines. So that would be our recommendation.
Okay, so not CNN, not Fox.
No.
Not Facebook.
If I would say a second site would be American Academy of Family Physicians. They have patient information there. They also have AAFP, which is American Academy of Physicians. Initials AAFP.org, which is strictly for patients, and that has information for you. Almost every doctor, especially the primary care doctors, the pediatricians, the family physicians, the obstetrics, the internal medicine, they have educated their staff. Their staff will be able to answer questions for you. Usually, if they can't, they'll send the question on to the doctor. Emily is actually my patient, so they will direct text me questions, and they know I will answer them.
Okay. You got any more questions over there, Jay?
Not so far.
Okay.
The live is lit, though. I will tell you that.
Yeah, they just soaking up all the information. Up all the information. Anything else? Any more information you would like the listeners to know about that we haven't touched on?
There's in our community. Yes, we have reasons to question vaccines, question new medications. We have a history that we fall back on that it makes us concerned. I was telling Valerie the other day, I have an aunt that I remember my mom telling me she was sterilized against her will. She didn't know it happened. We all have that experience, but we have to live in today. We have to move forward and trust in the reality that this is a vaccine that's given out worldwide. It has been given out to over 3 billion people. Okay, this is not a small amount of people. This is a worldwide vaccination effort. No vaccine is 100% pure. Nothing is 100% pure, right? So, yes, there have been some bad outcomes, but they are minimal. They are following the presumed statistics of 1 per million. Y'all have to remember that 1 per million is how likely you are to get struck by lightning. It's not impossible. So, yes, we have had, unfortunately, bad outcomes, but compared to the number of deaths, we just can't compare. The statistics, when we talked about that benefit risk ratio, it's hard for me to have my patients, my long haul patients, and not be able to give them concrete answers because this mutation we weren't prepared for. We don't know how to treat it. We just developed the monoclonal antibody, which, by the way, is both at Peninsula Regional, now Tidal Health, and at University of Maryland in Easton. So if somebody is diagnosed early enough, there is a treatment for them. And if they get that treatment, probably when you got in July, that didn't exist. They are less likely to have that long haul syndrome. So we're moving forward with the science. We're improving our care. But our number one battle is that if we can get enough people vaccinated, we can hopefully reduce this vaccine's occurrence. Smallpox used to kill, used to blind, used to cause miscarriage. Measles used to cause miscarriages. We have eliminated them, except for California. I don't know what they're doing over there. We have eliminated those diseases to the point that nobody remembers anybody in their class getting smallpox. We want to do that with this vaccine.
Yeah. I remember chickenpox.
Yes. Yes.
That was the thing. Everybody at elementary school had chickenpox at some point.
And half the class would be missing, right?
Yeah.
And chickenpox wasn't that bad of a virus, Getting shingles is now what we worry about, which is chickenpox that comes back as an adult. But with this virus, the number of complications are so many. People might end up on blood thinners for life because it causes clotting disorders. People who didn't have asthma now are getting diagnosed with asthma. You know, typically if you got a pneumonia, a regular pneumonia, you went to the hospital, or you saw me, you got put on antibiotics, and a month later it was just a bad episode. I still have patients that they can't breathe, that they're on oxygen.